Assad, 7 years ago, you were in London negotiating and ultimately signing the document known as Heads of Agreement. Odinga, at that same time, or a couple weeks after, you were in the streets of Belize City leading the protests against that very document. What has happened in the years since March and April of 1981? What have we learned since then?
Well, I think, first of all, that the riots were totally unnecessary to achieve the purpose that they stated they wanted to achieve, which was to prevent Belize from falling into the clutches of Guatemala or of carrying out any sort of agreement that was detrimental to Belize. I think that the lessons really that we learned from that have to do with other things, with the way politics was carried out in Belize in the years before that, with the lack of communication between people in government and people out of government, that is between government and opposition, but not only between the leaders of the two parties, but between the leaders and the peoples in both parties. And I think that the lessons we should have learned, I should say, from those events and other events, both before and since, have to do with that, with the political feeling almost between parties and between the rank and file and leaders of parties. And I don't really think that we have learned those lessons. They're still there for us to learn from.
When you say riots, you have got to observe that both political parties which were involved in this thing were not really interested in what the people wanted. This Heads of Agreement, as far as I am concerned, and my involvement with the Heads of Agreement came out of a national interest. I didn't view it from the point of view of Mr. Shoman, who would view it from a political party. I was not there because of being a member of the UDP party. I was there because of the interests of Belize. I never thought I was being used because, as I said earlier, I did it for my country. Now the politicians, they may have other motives, all right, and they thought they were using me. But deep down with me, I know what I was doing, and I know that no politicians were controlling my movement.
It's all very well for the brother here to say that he doesn't think he was used, no? But objectively, I think he was. I mean, I'm not saying he wanted to be used. But the point is that, as I said earlier, the reaction that came to the agreement as such was totally unnecessary, right? And didn't change history in any way. In other words, everything that has happened since then, and certainly up to independence, in relation to those agreements, would have happened, in my view, in exactly the same way, whether those riots had taken place or not. I believe that the UDP was behind fueling the rioting, right? Because, of course, Odinga played a major role, but he alone could not have accomplished what, in fact, the riots accomplished, which was virtual closing down of Belize City, anyhow, and the need later on to bring in a state of emergency. And they had a purpose in doing that, and to my mind, part of their fundamental purpose was to delay independence. I think that the UDP's objective was twofold. First of all, to embarrass and, if possible, bring down and change the government of the day at the time, through violence if necessary. And secondly, and as part of that, to delay the whole achievement of independence.
It is all right for Mr. Shoman to say I was being used, because he is viewing it from a political context. My view, as far as the heads are concerned, it was a national issue. When I spoke to the people of Belize during that time, I spoke of nationalism. I spoke about our rights, that the fact that this agreement came into being without any form of consulting the Belizean people. That was one of the reasons why I stood up, because I think that any agreement like that should have been put towards the Belizean people the same way how they use the media to implement to make people understand what the new constitution was all about, I would have thought that a similar way could have been done with the heads of agreement. You know, so when I look at the heads of agreement, I see it as something which Mr. Shoman knows more than I do, was hatched up between the two, England and the United States of America, to suit their purpose. It was not done, the heads of agreement was not done for the benefit of the Belizean people. PUP wanted it through because they wanted independence, and this was one of their way of getting independence by the 21st of September.
The 7 years since the heads of agreement and their ultimate rejection have not really brought us any closer to a settlement of the dispute. In fact, many people would say that today we're no closer to a settlement than we've ever been. Tell me, do we really want to settle the dispute with Guatemala?
Well, I think to answer that I should go back to the question of the heads just very briefly, right? And put them in the context in which they emerged. I believe that the real move for the independence of Belize, that actually had made it possible to come at the time it did, started in 1975 when we really began a serious internationalization campaign. And as you know, by 1980 we had won virtually unanimous support from countries all over the world, including Latin America. And then finally the United States in 1980 for the early and secure independence of Belize. The key to that was the security of Belize. And the key to that question of security was still in the hands of Britain, because it was impossible to get other groups of countries. We tried with the Commonwealth, for example, and other combinations. And nothing was possible except that Britain agreed to provide security for Belize after independence, which was always refused by Britain throughout all these years of negotiations. So when we went to London in March 1981, right, the key to the successful implementation of the independence deadline or program was in the hands of Britain. Now Britain, I think by that time, had become convinced that it would go ahead and grant that security, which up to then it said it could not do. But in return for that, it needed to at least be able to say that we, meaning Britain and Belize, had done everything possible to reach a negotiated agreement with Guatemala, and that the fault, if there was any, for a failure to arrive at an agreement must rest with Guatemala and not with Belize or Britain. And so there was a very serious attempt to reach some kind of an agreement in March.
Did you have a commitment from them that, come what may, with the heads of agreement, Belize was going to become...
That's not the way the British work. That's not the way they work. But it was clear in our minds, yeah, it was clear in our minds that that is what would happen. And that is what in fact happened. As the history showed, we did not reach agreement with Guatemala at all on any point. And we still went on to independence with the guarantee. And to my mind, that was the most important effect, you see, of the heads of agreement, which, as I repeat, was totally unaffected by the riots, i.e. we'll achieve independence without giving up anything at all to Guatemala and keeping the British with us and having their forces here to defend us.
So Belize need to settle this dispute with Guatemala now that we're independent?
I personally don't think so, because I said, and I write it, that I see this problem as something which is coming from Britain and America. You know, they control the governments in Guatemala. If they really wanted a settlement could have been had long time. As far as Belize is concerned, I see that as a way of keeping us in check. I have to be careful in what I am saying at this moment, because I don't see that the British is here to protect us. I say they are here to protect their interests. America, Britain are the one who control Belize and control Guatemala. So what joint security arrangement between Guatemala and Belize, or joint security arrangement between United States and Belize, you know, for me this whole thing is a game, and the Belizean people are not being told exactly what is happening. This problem with Guatemala is a fabricated problem that comes from the English and the Americans for military and economical reasons. We have got to grow up, and the fact that the British soldiers are here, that contribute to our complacency. we're not going to make progress. I think that the politicians have got to start to educate us towards nationalism so that we begin to develop a sense of pride in our country so that we can defend what is ours, and Belize belongs to Belizeans. I know, as I said, I see the problem that United Kingdom and the United States of America, who is benefiting most from this instability in the minds of Belizean people.
Have things really changed? Has the government of today learned anything from that experience in 1981? Could the same type of action and reaction that we had 7 years ago happen again today? Assad?
Well, what actually happened, first of all, I think it's necessary to pinpoint that, right? I don't think you can say in a blanket statement it was a national uprising against the government. First of all, I think it was to a large extent concentrated...
State of emergency was national.
Right, but I think that the riots and the rioting was concentrated largely in Belize City. Right. For example, in Cayo district, which is where I lived and operated at the time, all right? There was no such reaction, okay? And we were hearing about what Odinga was doing in the streets of Belize City, right? And we were getting ready for him. In fact, we had a group of people there that would have welcomed him had he come and tried the same thing in San Ignacio. And I think he would have gone back with a completely different message.
Well, what
right?
was it I was doing?
Completely different message.
What was it I was doing?
And this was the ordinary people.
Have a committee to meet me.
This was the workers and the peasants of Cayo waiting for you and saying, all right, you want to come and make trouble, you come here and see what will happen.
Odinga was doing. Now, what was Odinga doing? You see, you are saying, you hear Odinga was doing
you
certain things
walking around with a machete,
what was I doing?
Closing down businesses, threatening people to close down, which I think is true. I've spoken to various individuals that tell me that you in fact did that, and I don't think you would want to deny that, right? What we in the Cayo were saying, you can't come and do that here, and in fact we had a whole defense committee worked out, right?
I could also show you that you had City Councillor Main who was running around with shotgun. You know, so we never had any shotgun. You see, so when you say what Odinga was doing, you must also say what you were also doing. The party that you belong to, who brought about the situation, what were their supporters doing? You know the kind of life I lived during the Heads of Agreement.
No, but that's not the issue.
No,
the issue is...
The point is that your supporters made my life miserable for nothing other than standing up and telling people, look, this is your right. I used the machete, but nobody could have said that I used that machete to hurt them. That machete was a psychological thing. Right, and you know that as well as I do.
Yeah, but it was a threat of violence. It was a threat of violence, right? You would walk into a place and bang the machete down. The machete can kill people, right? The machete can hurt, can maim. So there was that threat. There was that threat of violence. But the point is, it was not a national uprising, okay, number one.
But wait a second.
Yeah.
You're doing the same thing you did on the last question. The question I asked...
Can it happen again? Yeah.
Yes, I mean, are those...
Yeah, okay, I think, all right. The main point I was going to make is this, that the government of the day at that time, right, through various crises similar to that one, relating to the same issue of Guatemala, and in relation to other national issues, had established a track record, in effect, of concealing facts from the people, right? It was not a government that was open to explain things to the people, to open its books to the people, so to speak, right?
Okay, let's bear in mind you were a prominent...
I was a part of that. I was a part of the government, and I was always calling for dialogue, right? I was always asking my government to behave in a different way with respect to informing people. Do you know, for example, that many times, at least 3 or 4 times while I was a minister of government, I was banned from Radio Belize, okay? I mean, it's a fact. It's a matter of fact that I proposed several times, right, that Radio Belize be changed altogether, etc., etc.
Let me put it to you this way, right? You are saying that there are certain aspects of the government policy that you were in disagreement with.
Absolutely, yeah.
So why the hell didn't you resign?
Why should I?
Because the purpose of, you know, you are mentioning several reasons. It is known all over in the Caribbean, other world politicians have resigned over different aspects of policies which the government did not agree with. Now, in this country of ours, PUP has been in power for so many years. When I came back to Belize, I hear disgruntled, this one is disgruntled, but not one of them resigned out of the interest of the country. No, you are telling me you disagree, but never one day you stood up and said, well, enough is enough. I must resign because I am thinking as a Belizean.
Well, I don't know if you want to go into the question of why I didn't resign on this program.
No,
I'm prepared to deal with that. But more specifically on this issue, right? I felt a commitment to work towards the independence of Belize, okay? The only party that was realistically doing that was the People's United Party. The other party, right up to 1981, wanted to delay independence for 10 years. We still would not be independent today if it was up to that party, okay?
You have to understand that the pattern that the UDP inherited was set by the People's United Party. Then we go back to the Constitution. As I said earlier, the Constitution that we have won't produce unity. The situation has occurred now where Belize is worse, as he said, than it was 4 years ago. We have a multitude of problems, which, as I said, is a pattern that was set by the People's United Party. The UDP is following a pattern. They have not come out with something that one can say is identifiable with the UDP party. What you have are reactions from the previous administration. He points this out. The reaction is their behavior, a pound of flesh, as he say. Well, this is normal because the politics of Belize has never been a logical thing. It has only tied to emotion. No, I like George or I like Manuel, but does one analyze the character who you like? What has these people done to merit your liking for them? It's, you know, it is pure emotional.
What I'm saying is that because of a certain amount of arrogance, right, that came to be associated with the government of the day, because of its refusal to share with the people and to be open with the people, there was a lot of resentment built up in the population. Now, I believe that the situation has deteriorated since then, and particularly since the advent of the new government of the UDP into office. The first occasion, of course, was the use of a law that admittedly had been passed by the PUP, but that was never used in that way to stop the opposition party from effectively using television. I think television was used very freely by the UDP when it was in opposition. As soon as they came to power in government, they used a law that was already in the books to stop the then opposition, which was the People's United Party, from having the same sort of access that the UDP had to television before. I believe the UDP has, in a much quicker time than it took the PUP. It took the PUP 20 years to become arrogant. I think it's taken the UDP, 20 months probably. And in a sense, it's understandable. They came with a lot of resentment themselves. They felt that they had been left out of everything. And they have written it quite freely in the Beacon, for example. They said, we have to now show them who is boss, and we want our pound of flesh now, and so on. This kind of revenge attitude. But I don't think that is very helpful for the body politic. And I don't think the people like that very much, right? Even those that support the UDP have a certain sense of fair play, I think, in them, a certain feeling of justice. And I think that they feel now that the government is already becoming too arrogant, is using its power to victimize people a little too much, is imposing its will and getting its revenge on its pound of flesh, a little too much. In fact, it's probably gone to 2 and 3 pounds by now. And they're getting fed up with it, right? And I think that given the right sort of issue, the same sort of reaction that you saw in '81 of a people against an arrogant government could take place again today.